Today we're going to be looking at factoring. In the previous unit, we would have things that look like this: x plus 6 times x plus 2. And we would want to distribute, the x to the x. So that would give us x squared as our first term. The x would then also distribute to the 2. We would distribute the 6 to the x. We would have plus 2x plus 6x. We would also want to distribute the 6 and the 2. So that would make plus 12 at the end. Well, if I combine like terms, I still have x squared. There's an x squared. 2x and 6x will combine together to make 8x. 2 we'll just stick on the end as plus 12. 12. So basically, if I look at the numbers that I came out with versus the numbers up here, it looks like 6 and 2 multiplied to be 12, and then plus 6 plus 2 added together to be 8. Well, that's basically all we're going to be doing. You're going to be given this portion right here, but you're going to have to tell me this part. So we're kind of doing the same thing, but backwards. I'm going to go ahead and look at our first example now. So if I want to say factor x squared plus 4x plus 3. I know in the previous cases that it looked something like this. It was like x plus some number or x minus some number, but we didn't know, or we would distribute them to get this answer. So I might as well just start out with that double bubble or double parenthesis, whatever you want to call it. And I know in order to get this x squared, I have to multiply x times x. These two numbers that I don't know what they are yet, they multiply to be a positive. They also add to be a positive, so both of my signs have to then be positives. Now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 3, but add to be 4. Well, if I list up my factors of 3 just in case to check it, 3 and 1 are the only ones I can think of. They add together to be 4, so x plus 3 and x plus 1. If you really want to, you can always check it and just distribute this stuff back out to each term. So you would have x times x would be x squared plus x. Distribute your 3 plus 3x plus 3. These two will combine in the middle, so we'll still get x squared plus 4x plus 3. So it works out. We'll look at another one now. I have x squared plus 5x plus 6. This one's a little bit different. We have to think just a little bit more. Once again though, I know that I'm going to start out with my two sets of parentheses. I know that both of the first things are going to multiply together to have to be x squared. Then I look at my signs. My second sign tells me that they multiply to be a positive, so I know that they're both the same signs. They either could be both positive or they could be both negative, because both of those things will multiply together to be a positive. But since they add to be a positive, they both must be positive. Now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 6 that add up to be 5. Well, looks like 2 and 3 are my only options, so I'm going to have to put in a 2. Put in a 3. It does not matter which one goes where. If you multiply it out, it'll work. This is the first one we've seen that the only difference is there's a minus. So still I'm going to start it the same way. Two sets of parentheses. I know that x and x are going to have to multiply together to be x squared. Then I look at this sign. This sign tells me that they multiply to be a positive, so they're both the same, either both positives or both negatives. But since they add up to be a negative, I know that both of my signs have to be minus. Two things that multiply to be 2 that add to be 3, well, my only options are 2 and 1. And that's it. Looking at another one, I have x squared minus 8x plus 15. So once again, just like almost always, we're going to start off with our two sets of parentheses. They multiply to be a positive, so they're both the same. They add up to be a negative, so I know then that both of my signs have to be a negative. Two numbers that multiply to be 15 that add up to be 8, so it could be 1 and 15, or the only other thing I can think of is 3 and 5. I think 3 and 5 is the only thing that add up to be 8, so I'm going to put in a 3 and a 5. Negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. Negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. So that one works out as well. In this one we have x squared plus 3x minus 10. Well, the only thing that we haven't seen so far is this little minus 10 right here. But if I'm trying to factor, always start out with x and x. Two things that multiply to be a negative, well, they can't be the same because two positives, if I put a positive and a positive, that would multiply to be a positive, or a negative and a negative would also be a positive right there. Since it's a negative, since I'm multiplying two signs, it has to be a plus and a minus. Doesn't matter if I put plus minus or minus plus, won't make a difference in the end. But now I need two numbers that multiply to be 10, and in this case, since they're different signs, their difference is going to be positive 3. So I have 10 and 1, 2 and 5. 2 and 5, their difference is 3, so I would want to put plus 5 minus 2, so that way 5 minus 2 is a positive 3. And 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So that works as well. This one's a little bit more difficult. Still starting off with a double bubble, two sets of parentheses. I know I'm going to start out with an x and an x because my first term is x squared. They multiply to be a negative, so my signs must be plus and minus. They have to be different. And I need two numbers that multiply to be 24. Whose difference is 2. Well, I know I have 1 and 24, 3 and 8, 4 and 6, also 2 and 12. But it looks like 4 and 6 are going to be my best bet since their difference is a 2. And I'm going to put the 6 in the positive, the 4 in the negative, so that way 6 minus 4 is a positive 2. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. Good to go. The ones that say solve are just a little bit different. We just have to do a little bit more work. For instance, if I had x times y equals 0, I would know that either x equals 0 or y equals 0 for this whole thing to be true. Because if x is 0, no matter what y is, 0 times whatever y is will be 0. Or if y is 0, if I put in a 0 for y and say a 15 for x. It doesn't even matter what number x is. So as long as y is 0, 0 times whatever x is will be 0 in the end. So basically I'm trying to get something times something, which in this case I had x times y, something times something equals 0, and I can take both of those things and set them each to 0 themselves. Because when they were 0, the whole thing was 0. So here I can't really get an x by itself quite yet. But if I factor this, if I try to factor this, that would leave me with something times something equals 0 if it factors. I know my first terms would be x's if I want to do this. They multiply to be a positive, they add up to be a negative, so it could be minus and minus. Now two things that add up or multiply to be 21, like 1 and 21 or 3 and 7. It's the only things I can think of. And they add it to be 10. Looks like we're going to go with 3 and 7. So if I put in a 7, I put in a 3. Remember, it doesn't matter which ones. This thing has been factored. Negative 7 times negative 3 is positive 21. Negative 7 plus negative 3 is negative 10. So that will work out. And now I have something times something equals 0. So just like in our example off to the side here, if we had something times something equals 0, we just took both of them and set them 0. So if I do the same thing here, if I say x minus 7 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0, then, well, if I say x is 7, I can put in a 7 into my top equation. So 7 and 7. 7 minus 7 is 0 times 7 minus 3 is 4. Well, 0 times 4 is 0. So I know that 7 will work. That is one of my solutions. X minus 3, if I solve this one, if I say x is 3, by moving this over, by adding 3 to both sides. So then if I put in a 3 here, 3 minus 7 is negative 4 times 3 minus 3, which is 0. So negative 4 times 0 is 0. Works out. So I have 1 and 2 solutions. They both work in this equation. For this example, once again, I'm going to want to solve this equation because it is equal to something. There is something to solve for. I can solve for w. And I have w squared minus 15w plus 44 equals 0. It doesn't already equal 0. We want to make it equal 0. In this case, it does already, so we're good. good to start factoring so that I can get something times something. So start off with our parentheses, set it equal to 0. In this case, I know my first terms are going to have to be w and w, because w times w is w squared. They multiply to be a positive, add to be a negative, so minus and minus. Two numbers that multiply to be 44 add up to be 15. I'll have 4 and 11, or I have 2 and 22. I think I'm going to go with 4 and 11 though. I just see right off the bat that 4 plus 11 is 15, so if I put in 4, there we go, and I put in 11, then I have something times something equals 0. So if I take both of those somethings, oops, not yet, and set them to 0, then w minus 4 equals 0, and w minus 11 equals 0. If I find when my factors are 0, my things multiplied together are 0, then if I put in whatever they're supposed to be, like in this case if I add the 4 to the other side, then my whole equation will be 0. So here's one solution, w equals 4, and my other, add 11, and plus 11, not 111, you guys know what I mean, and 11. So 4 and 11 are our two solutions to this one equation. This is the last example, and once again we are going to want to solve this equation, so we have an equal sign, so I know there's something to solve for. But in this case it doesn't equal 0 yet. Well, all I need to do then is subtract 24 from both sides, and I'll have r squared plus 2r minus 24 equals 0. Double 0, I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to make a smiley face or something. Yeah, equals 0. So I'm happy. Well, now I can see that I can try to find something times something equals 0. My first terms are going to be r and r. Multiply to be a negative, so have to be different signs. Well, two numbers that multiply to be 24, whose difference is a positive 2. We already did this one a little bit earlier, kind of. So I'm going to pick 6 and 4. I have a positive 2, so plus 6 minus 4 is positive 2. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. So this works. Now I can just take both of my factors. R plus 6 equals 0, and r minus 4 equals 0 to solve for r. So r equals negative 6, and r equals 4. Well, good luck with your homework tonight. I will be here in the morning. Ask me questions. Send me emails tonight. I will be checking it. Let me know what you guys think.